Ex-BlackWater CEO Erik Prince, the international mercenary baron, spoke at the Heritage Foundation recently, made a rather remarkable confession. Let's take a listen.
The Navy has been ineffective in Yemen. The U.S. has given very bad advice, very mixed advice in Gaza, preventing the Israelis from finishing it, or even preventing from ending that war in a clever way. I provided the Israelis a fully funded, donated ability to flood Gaza with water, with seawater, to flood the 300 miles of tunnels blocked by the Pentagon. We have a leadership apparatus that is truly the most sclerotic and literally obese. We have as many general officers today as we did in World War II, when we had 14 million men in our arms. And so in an era of video conferences, emails, and instantaneous communication, we have a super bloated, super top-heavy, and clearly not very effective security apparatus.
All right, well, first of all, Emily, I think I'm going to take his word on his assessment that the Pentagon is probably a little bit bloated at the top, and that the individual figures in the Pentagon are themselves a little bit bloated. That seems to track with my understanding of our current Pentagon. But the ruthless war crime he claims that he had funded and had seems to suggest that he got approved by the Israeli government, but was blocked by the Pentagon, is rather shocking. There was some discussion in Israeli press about flooding these tunnels with seawater, but for a variety of reasons that kind of faded away. What do you make of Erik Prince acknowledging that, or claiming, because we should say claims, because he didn't provide evidence that he had actually gotten the funding for this and pushed it forward. But what do you make of the claim that he had gotten funding for this and that the Biden administration blocked it?
I mean, I'm not in any way surprised that it was blocked, because and this is why he's sharing the story. I mean, it kind of confirms his point about the Pentagon. I know I sent this when he wrote it, I think it was a couple months ago, for I'm 1776, that website. This piece went pretty viral in kind of new right circles, conservative circles, when he was talking about just the lack of dexterity, the incredible lack of dexterity in American foreign policy, and innovation and inventiveness and creativity. And actually, he mentioned flooding the tunnels in that point, in that article back at the time. And I think that's why he's being sort of greeted warmly in Heritage Foundation circles, because as people are kind of craving some type of ingenuity and flexibility in American foreign policy, and are so eager to bash the Pentagon in the sort of aftermath of the Afghanistan withdrawal and the Trump moment on the right, which has become really opposed to forever wars in the midst of the Ukraine conflict. I think that's why Erik Prince is kind of being invited warmly into those circles, because he speaks to something with specifics that a lot of people are like, yes, that makes sense. Why aren't we doing these like different ideas? It's because of the K Street and the lobbyists and this massively bloated Pentagon. So it's not surprising to me at all. And I guess it's probably not surprising to you, Ryan, either.
I guess. The idea seems to run into, even for supporters of Israel, the obvious problem of, well, aren't or weren't the hostages being kept in those tunnels? Like it seems counterproductive to getting the hostages released, if that is your actual goal, to drown everybody involved.
Unless you have intelligence suggesting, as you know, that we get conflicting reports on what the intelligence is actually telling people, but that they have some idea of where people are, and they're not whatever. But hostages that have been recovered have said they felt like the bombing was indiscriminate, and that they could have been killed, that they didn't know, that they did think that they were just saved by sheer luck, and actually expressing discomfort with the IDF's bombing from that vantage point.
And all of this comes as ongoing bombing campaigns in Gaza continue to kill dozens of people a day, up to hundreds over in recent weeks, while the Israeli economy seems to be badly suffering from this kind of endless situation, as Netanyahu seems kind of hell-bent on making sure that these ceasefire talks that are underway, and it seems to be accelerating, never make it. But meanwhile, wanted to talk about one of the economic implications. You can put up this next element here. This is from Middle East Monitor headline: Israel says Eilat port bankrupt after months-long Houthi naval blockade. There's the lead of the article. The Israeli port of Eilat has officially declared bankruptcy because of a sharp decline in commercial activities and revenues due to the naval blockade imposed by Yemen's Houthis on Israeli-linked cargo ships since last November, a senior official has confirmed. Quote, "It must be acknowledged that the port is in a state of bankruptcy," explained the CEO of Eilat Port, Gideon Goldber. "Only one ship has come here in recent months. The Yemenis have effectively shut off access to the port," unquote. This is while the Israeli economy is taking a massive hit kind of across the board. Tourism has plummeted to virtually zero. The entire kind of low-wage workforce, which was made up of residents of the West Bank and Gaza who would travel to Israel and work those jobs, that has been completely shut off. At the same time, you have the tens to hundreds of thousands of people being called up out of the Israeli economy into the war economy to serve, in Gaza or in the north or in the West Bank, which has left firms across Israel going bankrupt or running extremely short-staffed. And so I guess it's not terribly surprising that this port is now bankrupt, but it seems like quite a projection of power for a group of people, the Houthis, who kind of were derided as kind of just nuisances a few months ago.
Right. And it kind of also explains, I think, some of the domestic pressures that are going to mount on Netanyahu. And we've been saying that, obviously, since basically October 8th, because Netanyahu is not, operating in the way that the American media sometimes portrays him. It's so myopic. American coverage of Israel is just, it's all about and it should mostly be about the war, of course. It's obviously the most important issue for the media to cover, but there's never any context. There's just so, it's just a lack of domestic context, I think, explaining why people either are rallying behind Netanyahu or realizing why their support may be fading for Netanyahu. And I think this is one of those pieces of that puzzle that we so rarely hear about.
And before we go, I did want to highlight one piece that my colleague Jeremy Scahill did over at Dropsite News. We can put that other element up. So this is an exclusive in-person interview that he did with the second in command of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, with Dr. Mohammed Al-Hindi. Now, Al-Hindi has basically never, since the 1980s, given an interview to a Western journalist, and it's the whole thing is revealing and startling in a number of kind of fascinating ways. We published it as a Q&A that you can find over at dropsitenews.com, and there are a couple of kind of funny moments in it as well. When Al-Hindi starts talking about kind of the American election, at one point he says, we would prefer a candidate other than Joe Biden. And I was joking on Twitter the other day that Biden has even lost Palestinian Islamic Jihad at this point, with following on the heels of Adam Schiff bailing on him. But so PIJ is a kind of an ally of Hamas, but PIJ was created before Hamas, but as an armed resistance group, kind of exclusively, aiming at liberation rather than getting into politics and governance like Hamas does. So they don't participate. They basically negotiate. Al-Hindi is the kind of lead negotiator for PIJ, but they have basically given their proxy to Hamas. And what he told Jeremy, take it with a grain of salt because it's not confirmed, but this guy would know that there was zero coordination around October 7th, that PIJ was not involved with any of the planning, and basically only learned of it as it started happening. It had been reported for months that October 7th was this joint operation between Hamas and these multiple other factions, including PIJ. But he said no, that they saw, just like everybody else saw, that Hamas had busted through the fence and was launching this operation known as Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, and they quickly scrambled to join in with them, but were not actually part of the planning or the strategy behind it. So the whole thing is totally fascinating, and it's insight into the mind of a guy who was actually listed by the State Department as a terrorist, which I guess he said it makes it difficult for him to get like a U.S. bank account, but otherwise, so far has not caused him significant problems. Though, most people in his position eventually do end up getting either assassinated or drone struck, but he hasn't yet.
Walking across the southern border. Is that a boomer joke? That was
sneaking across the southern border,
although
looking
it's
for work,
happened. So
seeking asylum.
There were, when Nikki Haley spoke yesterday, there were Israel flags being waved by a couple of people. Nothing, it wasn't a huge amount, but there were a couple of people who were waving those flags. I saw them a couple of times yesterday, and actually on Monday had a chance to speak with protesters who had honk for ceasefire signs right outside the convention. Obviously security is really tight here, but right outside the perimeter. Protests have not been huge. She does say that there were thousands of people. They came out from Minneapolis, so that's a decently long bus ride. Probably took them about six hours or so, and got here marching in the heat. Because it was hot when they did it, and making their presence known. It has been the security situation. There was security issues with a man who was shot by police outside. One man was taken into custody after he came near the perimeter with apparently an AK-47 pistol just yesterday. But inside the perimeter, things have felt quiet and calm, except for those two incidents which happened beyond the perimeter, and the protests are beyond the perimeter too. So not much outside noise.
That incident where the police shot somebody, right? It was two people that seemed to have some personal beef, right? Had nothing to do with the convention.
It seems that way as of right now. Yeah, it does seem that way as of right now. Now, the guy who was arrested with a
pro tip, if you're going to
scream mask.
Yeah, if you're going to have personal beef that involves guns or knives, don't do it anywhere near a political convention within days of an assassination.
That is a pro tip. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's just, it really has been, again, like we were talking about this earlier, but not a lot of infighting inside the convention, and any of that stuff that's happened outside of it has remained outside of it. There hasn't really been any, people have, quote, respected the perimeter. Now, it's another boomer joke to the same segment, to quote Ashton Kutcher in Cheaper by the Dozen. I guess that's not boomer. I guess that's like a cringe millennial joke. But the perimeter has been respected, and I can confirm that from Milwaukee.
I suspect that will not be the case in Chicago, but you and I will both be out there covering that. So we're looking forward to that perimeter undoubtedly not being respected. There will be plenty of tension inside, whether Biden stays on the top of the ticket or if he doesn't. Either way, it's gonna be rather raucous.
That's right.
All right. Well, that'll do it. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for everybody for joining us. It's a special evening edition of Counterpoints RNC. Emily, enjoy the rest of your time there. Emily's going to join me on my drop site podcast, Deconstructed. So check that out later. You can get her fuller insights into her time out in Milwaukee and the rise of this new populist right. Which, if there's got to be a right, this is the one I'd rather see rising, I'd say. Very interesting. I think I think that's right. But it's always the Reaganites. Give me this one. See, but this is where, maybe we can talk about this on Deconstructed tomorrow. I don't think there's as much daylight between Reaganism and Vanceism as people think there is. So we'll save that for another conversation. But I'll be checking back in with Crystal, and we'll be eager to come back to DC and chat with everyone about what happened here next week. Thanks, Ryan. All right. See everybody tomorrow.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.